The yearning to have, and the boredom of possessing. Have you ever desired something so intensely that it seemed like the only thing capable of filling a void inside of you? Maybe a new phone, a car, a relationship, a professional achievement. You imagined that once you attained it, you would finally feel that lasting satisfaction, that peace that seemed to always slip through your fingers. But then, after a while, what happens? The enchantment fades, the initial euphoria runs out. What once seemed essential becomes commonplace, almost irrelevant. And the void returns, and a new desire emerges. And the cycle begins again. Schopenhauer called this a cruel game between pain and boredom. While we desire something, we suffer from its absence. When we attain it, we fall into monotony and seek a new goal. We are always running, but never quite arrive. In the modern world, this cycle has been elevated to an unsustainable level. Social media bombards our minds with images of perfect lives, constantly reminding us of what we don't have. The illusion of abundance leads us to believe that happiness is always just around the corner in the next purchase, the next experience, the next digital validation. But what happens when we finally get all of that? We feel like something is still missing. As if we're always on the edge of satisfaction that never truly comes. The problem isn't just in what we're seeking, but in the way we've been taught to desire. Desire has become an end in itself, rather than a means to something greater. In this video, we will explore this invisible trap. Why do we long so much, and when we possess, why do we feel so little? And more importantly, is there a way out of this vicious cycle? The yearning to have, the human desire for possession, is something that seems to deeply and often invisibly shape our lives. We are constantly motivated by this pursuit, whether it's for material goods, social status, or even emotional validation. But what really explains this yearning? Why are we always looking for something that never seems completely sufficient? Schopenhauer, one of the most relevant philosophers on human desire, described this dynamic in a clear and disturbing way. He called it the will. For him, the will is the primal force that drives our actions, but it is never satisfied. Desire is infinite and insatiable, always pushing us toward the next goal, the next desire, in a constant quest. When we finally get what we want, satisfaction is momentary and soon dissipates, causing a new desire to emerge. For Schopenhauer, the will does not bring true happiness, only suffering, as we are always expecting something that will never be enough. Carl Jung, on the other hand, offers a different yet equally relevant perspective. He speaks about the shadow, a central concept in his psychology. The shadow is that which, in our psyche, is repressed, that which we do not want to see in ourselves. According to Jung, desire is often tied to this shadow. We constantly seek to fill the emptiness that it causes us, without realizing that, many times, this yearning is an attempt to deal with what is repressed in our unconscious. Desire is not just about what we want, but about what we cannot accept in ourselves. By seeking what we lack, we are often running away from ourselves. Zygmunt Bauman, a contemporary sociologist, brings a perspective that directly connects to the modern world. He talks about the liquidity of desire. In his view, we live in an age of liquid desires, where nothing is fixed, where nothing lasts. What we desire today may not be what we desire tomorrow. The objects of desire, whether material or immaterial, are always unstable and volatile. Bauman sees liquid modernity as fertile ground for dissatisfaction, where we cannot attach ourselves to anything because everything is in constant flux. Our yearning for more is perpetuated, and we never find something that brings stability or completeness. Like liquidity, desire dissolves right after being attained. And in the age of social media, this yearning is intensified in an even more radical way. Digital platforms amplify the feeling that it's never enough. What you have, who you are, will never be as good as what someone else has or is. The social feed, with its images of perfect lives, constantly puts us in comparison, creating the desire to possess something bigger, something more attractive. With every scroll, every new post, we are fed with a sense of lack, as if happiness lies somewhere else, in the experiences of other people, and not in what we already have. Social media becomes a battlefield where possession never brings rest because there's always more to desire. Desire never fades because it's not just about what we want to have, but about what we feel we need to be. And in this game, the feeling of fulfillment is always just out of reach, the boredom of possessing. Have you ever noticed that, often, what was once a great desire becomes insignificant as soon as we have it in our hands? The new phone, the dream house, the ideal relationship. In the beginning, there is a feeling of accomplishment, a temporary satisfaction, but over time, it begins to crumble. The great happiness promised by the acquisition fades away, and in its place, there's a void, a boredom. What once seemed essential becomes something trivial. Why does this happen? Schopenhauer believed that human life was marked by an endless cycle of desire and dissatisfaction. What he called the will of human beings is never fully satisfied. We always seek something, and when we get it, another desire arises in its place. When we finally achieve what we wanted, we feel a brief relief, but soon, that satisfaction dissipates, and the cycle starts again. For Schopenhauer, this cycle is a constant source of suffering. Our desires never fully met, and therefore, we never find peace. Byung-Chul Han, a contemporary philosopher, speaks about the excess of stimuli in modern society. The increase in the speed of information, the instant gratification provided by technology and social media, leads us into a constant search for more. In a world saturated with options and possibilities, satisfaction becomes more fleeting. With each achievement, we expect something even more satisfying, and this turns us into slaves of our own expectations. We are always looking for something that we know will never be enough. The illusion that happiness lies in the next achievement is one of the greatest deceptions we feed ourselves. What social media teaches us is that happiness is in the next goal, the next status, the next validation. When I get this, I'll be fine. But, upon achieving it, the void sets in. Digital platforms offer us a sense of fleeting accomplishment but never lasting fulfillment. The number of likes, followers, or recognition becomes the new measure of value, but paradoxically, the more we obtain, the more dissatisfied we feel. Digital consumerism exacerbates this feeling. With each new release, each trend, we are led to believe that it will be the thing missing to complete our happiness. Instant gratification, present in social media and the way we consume content, only worsens this insatiable search. Attention spans are increasingly fragmented, and our ability to savor what we already have diminishes. What is lost in the process is true appreciation, the ability to be present and deeply connect with what we already possess. Instead, we are constantly searching for the next big thing, and with that, the boredom of possessing settles in. What to do with this paradox? Now that we understand how the yearning to have and the boredom of possessing form an apparently endless cycle, how can we break it? What can we do when the incessant pursuit of more only leads us to a greater emptiness? The answer doesn't lie in desiring less, but in learning to live differently, in harmony with our desires, rather than being dominated by them. One of the first practices we can adopt to break this cycle is presence. We live in a fast-paced world where we are constantly projected into the future, into the next desire, into the next have. The practice of presence, or mindfulness, is a powerful way to reconnect with the current moment. This means stopping worrying about what's coming next, or what we don't have, and simply appreciating what is already in front of us. As the philosopher Lao Tzu said, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. This practice doesn't involve rejecting desire, but rather observing what we already have and being grateful for it, without feeling the need to go beyond it. Stoicism also offers a powerful approach to dealing with desire. Stoics believed that the key to happiness wasn't in seeking what is outside of us, but in cultivating an internal attitude of acceptance. Epictetus, one of the most renowned Stoic philosophers, said, "It is not things that disturb us, but our opinions about things." Instead of constantly seeking new possessions or achievements, the Stoics teach us to focus on our own attitude toward what we already have. By cultivating self-discipline and acceptance, we can learn to transform our desires into something more balanced and healthy. Another way to deal with the paradox of desire is through psychological minimalism. It's not just about reducing the number of material things we possess, but simplifying our needs and desires. Psychological minimalism invites us to reflect on what truly matters and to abandon the superficial and empty desires that drain our energy. As the philosopher Epicurus said, "It is not what we have, but what we enjoy that makes us happy." Psychological minimalism encourages us to focus on the essential, creating space for what truly brings value to our lives, rather than chasing after a hollow desire that will never be fully satisfied. How to develop a healthier relationship with desires. To develop a healthier relationship with desires, we must first recognize that desire itself is not a negative thing. The problem isn't desiring, but how we deal with those desires. A healthy desire is one that doesn't enslave us, one that doesn't define us. It's something that arises and that we can explore consciously, without it taking control of us. One way to cultivate this healthy relationship is by practicing self-understanding. Ask yourself, why am I desiring this? What does this desire represent for me? Often, our desires are linked to feelings of insecurity, lack, or fear. By recognizing the root of our desires, we can start making more conscious decisions about which desires to follow and which to ignore. Another helpful practice is learning to differentiate between momentary desires and deep desires. Momentary desires are impulsive, often triggered by external stimuli, such as social comparison. Deep desires, on the other hand, are connected to our core values, to what we truly want for our lives. When we can distinguish between these two types of desire, we can learn to focus on the most meaningful ones, those that truly contribute to our well-being. Final reflection: the search for real satisfaction is not in having, but in being. As we reflect on this cycle of the yearning to have and the boredom of possessing, an essential question arises: what are we really seeking? The answer, though counterintuitive, is simple. True satisfaction is not in having, but in being. It's not in the things we possess, but in how we live, how we relate to the present, and how we relate to ourselves. The incessant search for more things, more status, more recognition will never bring true peace. What brings us genuine fulfillment is the ability to simply be, to be present in our own lives, to accept what we have, and more importantly, to accept who we are. This doesn't mean that we should stop desiring or striving for something better, but that our happiness should not depend on those things. True satisfaction comes from the ability to live fully and consciously, embracing our imperfections and valuing what we already have. When we can develop a healthier relationship with our desires, we realize that what we've been seeking has always been inside us, the ability to live well with who we are and what we already have. In summary, what we explored throughout this video is the paradox between the longing to have and the boredom of possessing. How we intensely seek something, only to discover that when we achieve it, the satisfaction is fleeting, and soon comes the emptiness. Unraveling this cycle is essential to understanding human nature, our desires, and the modern society that constantly amplifies this sense of lack and dissatisfaction. The key to breaking this cycle is not in simply desiring less, but in changing our relationship with desire, learning to live with more presence, and becoming more conscious of our cravings. The reflection that remains is provocative. Are we living our lives to accumulate more, or to be more? Have we lost ourselves in the relentless pursuit of having, forgetting that true satisfaction may lie in simply being? By cultivating practices such as stoicism, mindfulness, and psychological minimalism, we can begin to create a healthier relationship with our desires and discover that, in the end, the true meaning of life is not in what we possess, but in how we live with what we already have. Now, the big question is, how can you apply this knowledge in your life? You can start today by reflecting on your own expectations and desires. Ask yourself, what truly brings value to your life? What are you seeking, and why? By understanding your deeper desires, you can begin to cultivate a more balanced and fulfilling life. Challenge yourself to live with more presence, detach from what doesn't bring real happiness, and seek to be more authentic rather than accumulating things. True freedom does not come from what we possess, but from how we choose to live with what we already have. As we wrap up today's exploration of the paradox between yearning and possession, take a moment to reflect. How are you living with your desires? Are you chasing endless possessions, or are you embracing the richness of the present moment? Remember, the key to real fulfillment isn't in accumulating more, but in being more, being present, being authentic, and being content with what you have. The journey starts within, and every small step you take toward a more mindful, intentional life brings you closer to the peace you've been searching for. If this message resonated with you, I encourage you to reflect on your own relationship with desire. What can you shift today to find deeper meaning and satisfaction in your life? Don't let the noise of the world dictate your happiness. Instead, focus on what truly matters, your own sense of being. Thank you for joining me on this journey today. Remember, real change starts with awareness, and awareness starts with you. Take that first step toward breaking the cycle, and live a life not defined by what you have, but by who you are.